Okay, so this idea that the Earth is the center of the universe was widely adopted. Everybody knew it was true, even though it's not. But that's what people thought, right? Okay, now along comes a guy named Nicholas Copernicus. Write it down. Copernicus. He's the first person to discover that the Earth isn't the center. The Earth actually goes around the sun. And I don't want to spend too much time. I'm going to kind of gloss over. We could spend like it takes more time than I can really give here to really have you understand it. So I'm going to zip through this part. What I want you to know is Nicholas Copernicus was the first guy to come up with a different model of the solar system. And what he based it on is the retrograde motion of Mars. Now, what this picture here is, you don't have to write the retrograde motion down, but it's in yellow. You don't have to write it down. But these are pictures every night of the position of Mars in the night sky. And it goes along, and then it circles back on itself. Retrograde means that it moves backwards, and then it goes forwards. Now, Mars isn't really moving backwards. People before that, to keep track of this, they're like, okay, Mars must be stopping and moving backwards, and then it moves forwards. Copernicus came up with a better explanation, a simpler explanation. Instead of it being that Mars actually moves backwards, what happens is if you have Mars and Earth both going around the sun, and you have Mars going around and Earth catches up and passes it on the inside track, while you're passing it, it would look like Mars is going backwards. That's the apparent retrograde motion of Mars. And he realized, wait a second. This observation is really complicated, trying to figure out how Mars could stop and pull backwards and go forwards. A much simpler explanation is Earth is going around the sun, and so is Mars. And as we pass, that's what causes the retrograde motion, okay? And so again, I don't want to belabor this point, but this is the evidence that Copernicus used. Now, Copernicus, he knew that this was going to be trouble because everybody in the world knew that the Earth is the center, and if you started saying that it's not, it's going to cause a lot of problems. So it wasn't until pretty much on his deathbed he released his, his studies, his information, and it became really very popular amongst the certain people. Go, look, this thing everybody knows is wrong, and knowledge moved forward. But a lot of people were like, no, knowledge, this is what we've all known. This is the way it is. You can't change that. And so there became some serious intellectual battles going on, right? Okay, so anyway, Copernicus came up with this theory that the Earth goes around the sun. Here's the sun, and the Earth goes around it. That is called the heliocentric model of the universe. Helio is another word for sun, helos. Helium is named after the sun, by the way. Anyway, heliocentric means sun-centered model. Okay, write that down. And here what you have is this new model of the solar system where the sun is in the middle and the planets are orbiting around the sun. Well, except the moon goes around the Earth, right? That still happens. And then you got the fixed stars in the background, right? So the new model of the solar system, the Copernicus first discovered, but he did it through observation of the motion of Mars, right? Anyway, so Earth going around the sun, that's a whole new way of looking at the universe. And so it's a revolutionary idea. Revolution of the Spheres was the name of Copernicus's book. That's where the term revolution comes from. His name was in Latin, but that's what it translates into. Okay? So now let's get to Galileo. Okay, now Galileo was already famous in Europe because he discovered certain things about how things move. He was studying motion. In 8th grade, we're going to study motion and physics and that kind of thing. And I'm sure, at least in my class, I know we're going to get back to Galileo, man. This guy, he kind of invented the scientific method of observation. Well, see, now that's the deal. What Galileo believed, he was one of the earliest true scientists because he believed instead of just believing what Aristotle says, you believe the evidence of your eyes. You believe your observations. That's the nature of science. To observe the world and let the world decide how it works and the world tell you. You do experiments and the data from your experiments tells you how things work, not because somebody says so. even Mr. Davis, but not Aristotle or anybody else, right? You observe with the evidence of your eyes. So Galileo, what he did, you know how astronomers use telescopes to look at the stars? He didn't invent the telescope, but he was one of the earliest people to use one. He started looking at the sky with telescope, observing it with new instrumentation, with new tools, and he saw things nobody had ever seen before. So his observations, write this down, his observations with the telescope convinced him that Aristotle was wrong, that the Earth is not the center. Now this, by the way, is a model of his telescope. It was very fancy looking because they were sophisticated contraptions, high tech at the time. Okay, write this down. Galileo's observations with the telescope convinced him that Aristotle was wrong, that Earth is not the center. All right. I'm going to get into the second video here in this lesson talking about talking about Galileo and what did he see with the telescope that convinced him everybody in the world knows Aristotle's right. The sun goes around the earth. Galileo discovered, nope, not true. After Copernicus, but he brought it to the forefront. He discovered, using observation, scientific method, that the sun is actually the center of the solar system and the Earth goes around the sun. Okay, that's what the second video is going to be about. Answer the questions following this, then watch the second part of the video. Bingo.